This is Let's Get Growing with horticulturalist Nathan Wilson at Lanier Nursery and Gardens in Flowery Branch. Get information you need for gardening, landscaping, and home plant care. We're taking your calls right now at 706-865-3181 or email info@wrwh.com. Now, here's Nathan.
Good morning, gang. Welcome to the program. What a nice, brisk morning it has been so far. We are looking for an exciting day. As I drove into the station here, coming through Murrayville, I noticed there's a good bit of frost out there. A nice, great glazing of frost on pretty much everything, isn't there? So what does that mean for us? What does that mean for somebody who's growing in the landscape, gardening? Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that and some things you want to think about if you haven't done so already. But hey, happy Thanksgiving. This is Thanksgiving week coming up. The next time we chat will be after Thanksgiving. So today we're going to kind of make a nice Thanksgiving program. A little special Thanksgiving program. I was doing some research about what is Thanksgiving, what's the history, and I just reminded myself of being in school again, and maybe for some of us, that's the last time that we've heard talks about Thanksgiving is high school, maybe middle school, elementary school, whatever. So today I'm going to read a few stories of the first Thanksgiving, what it's been since then, and what it means today. And perhaps this morning you'd like to chime in. Maybe you want to become part of the program and talk about some of your Thanksgiving traditions, some of your Thanksgiving stories, and you're always welcome to call with gardening questions, of course, at 706-865-3181, and we'll be glad to chat with you. But this morning, when you think about Thanksgiving, we've got to remember that Thanksgiving is directly associated with the garden. It's associated with the soil. It's associated with the harvest. And so like I said, today we're going to give some garden goodness throughout the program, but also sprinkle throughout there some stories of Thanksgiving. So let's just start off this morning with that. In the beginning, the very first Thanksgiving, in September of 1620, there was a small ship called the Mayflower. Remember that? It left Plymouth, England, carrying 102 passengers, an assortment of religious separatists seeking a new home where they could freely practice their faith, and other individuals lured by the promise of prosperity and land ownership in the New World. But after a treacherous and uncomfortable crossing that lasted 66 days, they dropped anchor near the tip of Cape Cod, far north of their intended destination at the mouth of the Hudson River. 1 month later, the Mayflower crossed Massachusetts Bay, where the Pilgrims, as they are now commonly called, began the work of establishing a village at Plymouth. Did you know, though, that first Thanksgiving, that lobster, seal, and swans were on the Pilgrims menu? Not our favorite turkey dinner, but perhaps a little seal for Thanksgiving would be something you could try. But anyhow, throughout that first brutal winter, most of those colonists remained on board the ship, where they suffered from exposure, scurvy, and outbreaks of contagious disease. Only half of the Mayflower's original passengers and crew lived to see their first New England spring. And in March, the remaining settlers, they moved ashore, where they received an astonishing visit from the Abenaki Indian, who greeted him in English. Several days later, he returned with another American Indian named Squanto, a member of the Pawtuxet tribe, who had been kidnapped by an English sea captain and sold into slavery before escaping to London and returning to his homeland on an exploratory expedition. Well, Squanto taught the Pilgrims, who were weakened by malnutrition and illness, how to cultivate corn, how to extract sap from maple trees, catch fish in the rivers, and, as we've talked about before, avoid poisonous plants. He also helped the settlers forge an alliance with the Wampanoag, a local tribe which would endure for more than 50 years and tragically remains one of the sole examples of harmony between European colonists and Native Americans. And then, in November 1621, after the Pilgrims' first corn harvest proved successful, Governor William Bradford organized a celebratory feast and invited a group of the fledgling colony's Native American allies, including the Wampanoag chief Massasoit. Now, it's remembered as Americans' first Thanksgiving, although the Pilgrims themselves may have not used that term at the time. The festival lasted for 3 days, but while no record exists of the historic banquet's exact menu, the Pilgrim chronicler Edward Winslow wrote in his journal that Governor Bradford sent 4 men on a fowling mission in preparation for the event, and that the Wampanoag guests arrived bearing 5 deer. Historians have suggested that many of the dishes were likely prepared using traditional Native American spices and cooking methods. Because the Pilgrims had no oven and the Mayflower's sugar supply had dwindled by the fall of 1621, the meal did not feature pies, cakes, or other desserts, which have become a hallmark of our contemporary celebrations. Boy, I would hate to not have pecan pie. Pilgrims held their second Thanksgiving celebration in 1623 to mark the end of a long drought that had threatened the year's harvest and prompted Governor Bradford to call for a religious fast. Days of fasting and Thanksgiving on an annual or occasional basis became common practice in other New England settlements as well. During the American Revolution, the Continental Congress designated 1 or more days of Thanksgiving a year, and in 1789, George Washington issued the first Thanksgiving proclamation by the national government of the United States. In it, he called upon Americans to express their gratitude for the happy conclusion of the country's War of Independence and the successful ratification of the United States Constitution. His successors, John Adams and James Madison, also designated days of thanks during their presidencies. Folks, this is what the first Thanksgiving looked like. It looks probably a little bit different than what yours does today. And we're going to talk a little bit more about modern Thanksgiving coming up. And also, we're going to talk a bit about when Thanksgiving becomes official. As you see, the presidents, they kind of gave proclamations and talked about, encouraging Americans to set aside days of thanks. But there was no official Thanksgiving. But that does come along, and we'll be back with more of that after we talk a little bit about gardening goodness. I want to let you know that at the nursery, Lanier Nursery and Gardens in Flowery Branch, where I work, this year we're trying something different. We are creating what we call Christmas Tree Land. Christmas Tree Land. So where we normally sell trees with roots, we will now have trees that are fresh cut trees. And those trees will be Fraser fir trees, of course, ranging from 6 to 10 foot tall. And we're going to stay open later on the weekends, on Friday and Saturday, so that you can come visit and grab a little cup of hot cider and just have fun with the kids. We'll have a little place you can get purchase a pack of s'more makers, a s'more kit, I guess I should call it, s'more maker, s'more kit, and just make a fun day of going out and picking a tree. The box stores, they've pretty much made picking trees just stand on an asphalt parking lot and just really have no fun. But we want to make it fun. We're going to have music. We're going to have cider to drink and s'mores to make. So come on out to Lanier Nursery and Gardens.
You mean a half-empty parking lot and a couple of shop lights doesn't get you in the holiday mood?
I don't know. It something about that just makes me not want to be in a holiday mood. Say it ain't
so.
Yeah. No, that's Buster chiming in. He's right about that. We want to make sure that we get in the holiday mood, get into the holiday spirit. So come out and check out Christmas Tree Land at Lanier Nursery and Gardens in Flowery Branch. Now, if you're just joining the program, you may or may not know that you can watch our show live on Facebook. Of course, maybe you're listening at 93.9 FM or 1350 AM. But you can also listen and watch on Facebook and YouTube. On YouTube, we have our old shows. So just type in WRWH either on Facebook and YouTube. Be sure to like WRWH's Facebook page and YouTube channel, and that way you'll get all the information throughout the week that WRWH provides to you. While people are watching on Facebook, we have with us Kaylin, Melanie, Philip, Samantha, Hilda, and Diane. So we appreciate y'all listening in. And you too can chime in on Facebook with a comment or a question. If you'd rather call me, that'd be great. You can call us at 706-865-3181. But if not, I want to remind you too that this holiday season, you're going to be away from the radio probably, but that doesn't mean you have to be away from WRWH. You can listen to WRWH on your smartphone. All you have to do is go to the TuneIn app. Go to wherever you purchase apps. It's a free app, but you download your app from either Google Play or the Apple Store, the Apple App Store, and you type in TuneIn. and you can download the app there, and you can get all of the programming that WRWH brings to you throughout the week. So if you have to go away to see family, you don't have to leave WRWH. Now that we've talked a little bit about Thanksgiving, I want to remind you of some things we should be doing in the landscape. This week, as I've already alluded to this morning, there was a nice heavy frost. Maybe you've had some heavy frost already, but I want to remind you that because of this frost, there are some things you should be doing. Do you have tinder bulbs in the landscape? Tinder bulbs would include things like caladiums, elephant ears, and dahlias. Most of these plants, they can overwinter. Elephant ears do okay, but if you want to make sure that they don't succumb to frost, caladiums most likely will. Caladiums will definitely be way too tender. Dahlias, borderline as well. But if you want to make sure that you carry these over into next year, you're going to have to do a little work. Now, while you can still find them, their leaves are still present. Maybe they're dried and crispy already, or maybe they're just kind of like hit by the frost and nice and soft and mushy. Either way, you can find the bulbs, so you don't want to wait much longer. There is a chance, like I said, for these bulbs to be damaged by winter, but again, mild winters may not be a problem. We don't know what's to come. But just to be safe, find those plants, find their leaves, grab your spade and your shovel, and go down there and dig out the bulbs, remove them from the ground, and then you want to remove as much soil as you can without washing them. You don't necessarily want to wash the bulbs, but you can remove the soil, let them dry a bit for a couple of days or so, and then brush off any extra dry, powdery soil that may be there. And thirdly, I encourage folks to coat the bulbs in elemental sulfur. Now, elemental sulfur does not smell all that wonderful. As you can imagine, being sulfur, it's not the best smelling thing. But it does help to prevent disease. It does help to prevent disease, fungus, bacteria over winter. So just kind of roll them in the elemental sulfur like you would in flour or something. That's kind of the consistency of elemental sulfur. And then you want to make sure that these bulbs and roots are stored in a cool, dry place, really in like a box of peat moss. The peat moss can hold on to some moisture and still give the air that these bulbs will need. They definitely don't need to stay wet, because if they stay wet inside and they're not growing, there is a potential for heavy rot and complete failure, complete fatality. Somebody says, how fatal was it? Well, it was completely fatal. So they may not come back. But definitely keep them in a box of peat moss, something like a cardboard box, or even a paper bag would be fine. You don't want to wrap it in plastic. You don't want to wrap it in plastic because plastic is not breathable, and it can hold too much moisture and not allow for gas exchange. So if you have things like caladium, elephant ears, and dahlias, be sure to do that, because that is going to be important, especially since we're starting to lose our heat, and it's getting cold. Things are getting cold out here. So this morning, we will be right back with more discussion on Thanksgiving. I hope you call us, 706-865-3181, and give us a little bit of chat about your Thanksgiving. We'll be right back after this.
Live editions of Let's Get Growing can be heard Saturday mornings at 9 on AM 1350 and 93.9 FM WRWH.
Back to more Let's Get Growing with Nathan Wilson.
Hey, gang, we are having some fun this morning talking about Thanksgiving, talking about all things fall. All things fall. This morning, we are going through some discussion, some history about Thanksgiving, and I hope that you may join in. I'll talk a little bit about my Thanksgiving traditions, but if you want to talk about your Thanksgiving traditions, we'd love to hear it this morning, or your gardening questions, which, of course, we always are down to answer, 706-865-3181. And just during the break, Ed called us. Ed called us, and he had some questions about persimmons. He talked to Buster a little bit, and he's saying that his persimmons, they start out really great, but by the end of the season, only one or two of them is left.
Let me
preface this.
Hybrid persimmons.
Hybrid persimmons. Okay.
He was very specific.
Very specific. Hybrid persimmons. So with persimmons in general, Ed, I don't know when you might have planted these. I'd love to know when you had planted them. I will say this, that the younger they are, the longer it takes for them to be able to hold on to their fruits. And so I've planted persimmons before, and maybe this is the Fuyu variety, something in that range is what it's probably sounding like. So I planted a Fuyu several years ago, the Fuyu persimmon, which, by the way, folks, gets huge. I mean, as big as a baseball probably. And let me tell you, this time of year, they're delicious. My wife absolutely loves them, and the tree is at my parents' house, but we'll sneak over there and grab some of those for sure. But Ed, the first few years, you'll probably see that they don't hold on to many fruits. Now, if you have more than one plant, that'll be helpful because a little bit of cross-pollination will help will help the tree to hold on to the fruits. But part of it is it's just their age. It's just they're sort of juvenile in a way, and they don't have the ability to hold on to those. So if these have been planted, say, in the past 4 years or so, or less, you probably will notice a lot of fruit drop. I mean, Ed, for the first couple of years, we saw beautiful blooms, beautiful flowers. I don't even know if they really set the fruits, but all the flowers fell off after they had bloomed, and I was really depressed and sad about that. But be assured, Ed, that give them a few years, continue to fertilize them throughout spring and summer, give them some growth. Let them push them to grow, and I think you'll see some great results. It just takes time with these persimmons, particularly, like I said, the Fuyu varieties. If you're looking at the ones that are supposed to be much larger, the hybrid, as you call them. So, Ed, hang on tight. Definitely keep the plants healthy, keep them going. You don't need to do much to them now, but enjoy the ones that you can. But like I said, if these have been planted in the past 4 years or less, you should see some good success as we go forward into the future. Speaking of persimmons, if you're interested in the description of these juicy, delicious Fuyu, the Japanese persimmon, you can come find them at Lanier Nursery and Gardens, which is located in Flowery Branch, Georgia. You can find me there throughout the week, Monday through Saturday. 8 to 5, by the way, 8 to 4 on Saturdays. But anyhow, if you want to try out persimmons, they're a great plant. And let me tell you, folks, they're beautiful. They're ornamentally, they're gorgeous. You can put them in the front yard and not feel ashamed. You know, sometimes you don't want to put apple trees and pear trees in the front yard, but I will say that this time of year, they have stunning fall color, and beautiful, absolutely beautiful fruits that are delicious. So, talking about persimmons, we may think a little bit about persimmon pie. I don't know. I've never had persimmon pie, but I have had apple pie and pecan pie, and those are great Thanksgiving traditions. But have they always been Thanksgiving traditions? Let's continue with our talk about Thanksgiving, and if you'd like to call in and talk about your Thanksgiving traditions, you can at 706-865-3181. In 1817, New York became the first of several states to officially adopt an annual Thanksgiving holiday. Each celebrated it in a different day. However, and the American South, listen to this, the American South remained largely unfamiliar with the tradition. But in 1827, the noted magazine editor and prolific writer Sarah Hale, author among countless other things of the nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb, launched a campaign to establish Thanksgiving as a national holiday. And listen to this, for 36 years, she published numerous editorials and sent scores of letters to governors, senators, presidents, and other politicians. Did they listen for 36 years? No. So some things never change. Abraham Lincoln finally heeded her request in 1863 at the height of the Civil War, and in proclamation entreating all Americans to ask God to commend to this tender care all those who have become widows, orphans, mourners, and sufferers in the lamentable civic strife, and to heal the wounds of the nation. He scheduled Thanksgiving for the final Thursday in November, and it was celebrated on that day every year until 1939, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt moved the holiday up a week in an attempt to spur retail sales during the Great Depression. Thanks, Rosie. Roosevelt's plan, known derisively as Franksgiving, was met with passionate opposition, and in 1941, the president reluctantly signed a bill making Thanksgiving the fourth Thursday in November. That's when Thanksgiving became official, folks. And of course, there's always controversy when the government gets involved, but this is not that kind of show. So we're going to talk more about gardening. Let's go ahead. While we're talking about Thanksgiving, I want to talk about just my Thanksgiving tradition. basically, since I was a kid, we would do one of two things. We would meet with our family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and kind of do your traditional thing. There's a nice turkey. My uncle does a great turkey. And so we would do that. We would all bring covered dishes and casseroles and whatnot. And, kind of a staple of that Thanksgiving is, of course, my grandmother, my granny. And she will not have Thanksgiving with us this year, not in this place. She did pass, like I've already mentioned before. But, I'm not the only one. There's plenty of us who Thanksgiving traditions change. And things are going to, just like a garden grows, our life is growing and changing. Every year the leaves fall, but every year there's the promise of spring, the hope that the warm weather brings us. And maybe the same with your family. Maybe we'll be missing someone this year who won't be around the Thanksgiving table. But we know that that will be all right. Things will change and things will move on. Some years, just my immediate family, my mother, father, and sister, we would go and particularly go to Dollywood, that kind of Pigeon Forge area. We didn't always go to Dollywood, but we did go to Pigeon Forge. We'd go to Cades Cove, which is a great historic site up in that area of Tennessee, and we would spend, I guess back then we only had 3 days out of school. Now it seems like, I think most schools get like a whole week. Is that right?
I think my little cousin's out of school all next week.
Yeah, so like for the next month, they don't have to go to school.
Lucky.
Yeah, lucky. But that's basically our Thanksgiving tradition. Hey, I tell you what you can do is go to Facebook and you can share with us your Thanksgiving tradition. I think we even have a little question going on there. Give us a shout out to what is your favorite thing about Thanksgiving. We look at Facebook Live and we see a question from Marie. Marie says, when is the best time to plant bulbs? Looking for shady area bulbs. Okay, Marie, so let's talk about this. Now is a great time to plant bulbs. They're actually out there and available. They are around. You should be able to source them either at a feed and seed. I would say come to Lanier Nursery and Gardens. We just don't carry bulbs. We carry plants that are in pots. But you can find them, and you want to get them in ground now. I'm glad you asked that because now that the temperatures are cooler, the soil, I checked it last night, and in Gainesville at least, was about 50 degrees. So the soil is cool enough that it won't really encourage much foliar growth, but it will encourage root growth from those bulbs, creating a strong root system for your bulbs to pop up in spring. Now, Marie, the goal here is you're looking for a shady area. You could probably do crocus, maybe some hyacinths. Grape hyacinth, I believe, is a better name for that. Of course, daffodils. Daffodils can grow and naturalize very well. You plant maybe 100 this year, and in a few years you may have 200. And they'll just naturalize and look like they've always been there. So be sure to get those in the ground pretty soon. You'll be doing a good job. We thank you, Marie, for your question coming from Facebook Live. You can join us there if you'd like as well. Let's talk a little bit about camellias. Camellias or camellias, I don't know how you prefer to say it. Either way, I would say is appropriate. But there are basically two main groups. There are two main groups. The reason we're going to talk about camellias is because both of these groups bloom in the winter time. The first group of camellia is called the Japanese camellia. Now, the Japanese camellias, they are large flowers, large leaves, and generally they bloom later in the year, later in the winter. So sometime, say, after Christmas, you'll start to see them blooming. Now, the other type of camellia that we use in our gardens is the sasanqua. Say that with me, sasanqua. The sasanqua camellia is a smaller leafed camellia with a smaller bloom, but doesn't mean it's any less impressive because they set a lot of buds and they will bust open. And they bloom before Christmas. So we have sasanqua camellias that are blooming now and will continue to do so. And then we have the Japanese camellias, which bloom after Christmas and on into the spring. But there's more to camellias than you thought. And if you like a good glass of sweet tea, hang on tight with us through this break because I'm going to tell you how camellias and sweet tea are related. We'll be right back.
Live editions of Let's Get Growing can be heard Saturday mornings at 9 on AM 1350 and 93.9 FM WRWH.
More great information coming your way on Let's Get Growing with Nathan Wilson.
All right, gang, we are having fun talking about Thanksgiving, talking about gardening. Like I said earlier, Thanksgiving is directly related to the landscape, directly related to the soil, directly related to the garden, because, of course, we know that we're giving thanks for the bounty that the Lord has given us. This morning, I want to remind you that we have a Christmas tree land going on at Lanier Nursery and Gardens. We're getting our trees in today. And they're going to look great. So they're Fraser firs, and we'll have living Christmas trees as well. A living Christmas tree is a great way to commemorate a certain event that happened that year. Maybe there was a child born. Maybe there was a house built. Maybe there was a life that was lost, but in memory. So you can plant a tree and decorate it, and then plant it after the Christmas is over. Instead of throwing it out at the dump, you can put it in the landscape. So we'll have some living trees to use this Christmas as well. I do want to finish up really quick, I promised you, my discussion on sweet tea and camellias. Of course, we talked about the blooming camellias, the Japanese, the sasanquas, and when they bloom and how big they are. Of course, they come in a variety of colors from pinks to reds, and pinks to reds to whites, and a mixture of all of those. But did you know that there is a camellia called the sinensis camellia, which is the camellia that is used to produce tea. And of course, you have green tea, you have black tea, you have orange, peacoat, whatever. All of those are different processed leaves from the same plant, which is a camellia plant. It's a beautiful plant, actually. Still has a nice white or maybe pink flower on it, like your camellias, but they're much tinier. But anyhow, Camellia sinensis is what you are looking at when you go to the store and grab a bag of tea. But the sasanqua camellias are blooming now, and if you have some, don't forget to enjoy them indoors. Be sure to cut them with short stems, and you can float them in a crystal saucer or some kind of dish as a centerpiece for Thanksgiving. Bring them inside. Just float 3 or 4 flowers, or 10 if your saucer is big enough, and it could make a great centerpiece for some beauty and color. We do have a question coming from David. David is joining us on Facebook Live, and we appreciate him. I hope you'll be sure to like WRWH's Facebook page and also Lanier Nursery and Gardens, because David is asking about palm plants. He said, what about planting palm plants in winter weather? He has about 10 different types. Okay, David, there's only a few palms that are going to be hardy to our zone. Our zone gets to it's listed to get to about 0 degrees. That rarely happens, but we may have a terrible winter in 10, 15 years, and the USDA says that our zone, our area, can get that cold over time. So you've got to make sure that the palms you're using are going to be, the word is hardy. It's a good point to bring up, because a lot of folks come to the nursery and they say, is this plant hardy? And what they mean is, does it do well? Is it just a great plant? But hardy in the horticulture sense means that it will not be damaged by winter weather. Hardy means it will last the winter. So if it's a tender palm, David, you don't want to put them outside this time at all or ever. You want to keep them in a container, take them outside in the summer, bring them into the house during the winter, or some kind of crawl space or somewhere protected. But David, if you have something like a needle palm or a windmill palm, maybe even a pindo palm, those palms are going to be hardy all winter long in our zone. And yes, you can plant them now. It would be better to plant them now. But you definitely need to know which palm you've got before you just stick it out there, because most palms are not going to be able to overwinter outside ever. But like I said, windmill palm is probably the most hardiest palm that's available, that actually grows into a tree. It can become a quite tall tree. It slowly grows, well, not really slowly, about 1 to 2 foot. We will be getting a small batch in for a special order, so I have a few left over if you're interested in those at Lanier Nursery and Gardens. But there's already some that are sold, but we'll probably definitely have a bigger selection in the spring. So David, definitely check us out at Lanier Nursery and Gardens, and we can help you out with more of those details. So we've been talking about Thanksgiving today, and we talked about the history. We talked about Thanksgiving becoming official. But what about today? If we were an observer in the future, if we were looking back to today, what would we see? Well, in many American households, the American celebration The Thanksgiving celebration has lost much of its original religious significance. Instead, it now centers on cooking and sharing a bountiful meal with family and friends. Turkey, a Thanksgiving staple, is ubiquitous. It has become all but synonymous with the holiday. May or may not have been on offer when the Pilgrims hosted the inaugural feast back in 1621. But today, however, nearly 90% of Americans eat the bird, whether roasted, baked, or, some favorite, deep fried, on Thanksgiving, according to the National Turkey Foundation. Other traditional foods include, here we go, Buster, stuffing, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and pumpkin pie. Volunteering is a common Thanksgiving activity, and communities often hold food drives and host free dinners for the less fortunate. Now, on Facebook, we have a questionnaire going. What do you like the most about Thanksgiving? What excites you most? And Buster, what is the result so far?
We got a bunch of liars is what we've got.
We got liars? Okay.
100% results so far. Everybody's saying family. That's what your family excites you. Excites. And I'm not saying look you're not looking forward to seeing it, but you're excited about seeing family, not the turkey, not the dressing,
not the stuffing, not the
the food.
Yeah,
that's what excites me.
That's what excites you the most, right?
If I could have that, just the food and
just the food, and
I'd be happy. I mean, I see my immediate family all the time.
Sure,
it's not enough to get excited over.
You don't see pecan pie all the time.
That's something I've got to trudge through if we're being honest about it. That's That is that's the toll that I got to pay the troll.
Oh, well, there you go. That's a good point. So while we're on that subject, what tell us, because
I'm an angry young man, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. So if you want to share with us, just like Buster has shared his angry Thanksgiving troll. If you want to share with us your Thanksgiving traditions, I'd like to hear about it. Give us a call at 706-865-3181, or, of course, you can answer our questionnaire, and maybe food will excite you. I hope food excites you as it does Buster. Parades have also, don't forget about parades. They've become an integral part of this holiday in cities and towns across the United States. Of course,
do watch the Macy's thing.
You do? I was about to say the Macy's. So you're not a complete troll.
No. Ever since about 8 or 9, that was something that my mom and dad kind of... Yeah. That habit stuck. I always watched the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
Well, my mom and dad would turn it on when we were waking up and getting ready to go to see the family and
always
eat the food.
Wanted to see Snoopy.
Yes, Snoopy. He's the best. He's the favorite. He's the favorite. But it was that, and that actually started in 1924. That's in New York City, of course. Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. It's the largest and the most famous. It attracts 2 to 3 million spectators along its 2.5 mile route, and it draws an enormous television audience.
Their parade's more relevant than their stores are these days.
You're terrible, Buster. You're terrible. You're true. But you're true. But think about all the things that are in that parade. Marching bands, other performers. Of course, it's become really celebrated. It's become, you have a lot of celebrities and famous people that are in it. There's elaborate floats, of course, like Snoopy, and giant balloons. Oh, giant balloons. You got to love that. But listen to this. Remember, don't forget what's going to happen. And this started in the mid-20th century, maybe earlier. The President of the United States has pardoned 1 or 2 Thanksgiving turkeys every year, sparing the birds from slaughter and sending them to a farm for retirement. And, of course, governors have done that as well. But if you have a Thanksgiving tradition you'd like to share, we'd like to hear it. I heard tell of a friend of mine who they do a pin the feather on the turkey, where before they start cooking their turkey, they will throw darts at it.
What were some traditions in the Wilson household?
Well, like I said, our main tradition, other than some years we would go with our extended family, and we would have kind of your classic Norman Rockwell thing. Everybody's dressed up in sweaters and flannel, and or what we generally did we would go on a trip to particularly the mountains in Pigeon Forge area and Gatlinburg and Dollywood, that whole area there. And we would just, because my parents, they say, okay, we can enjoy each other without having to cook and clean and do all that, So you still get the good food. You go out to a nice place. There's the grist mill in Pigeon Forge, which is a great, down-home country food. And so we would eat there. And guess what? the servers and all, they took care of the mess, not us, you know.
Oh, man.
You just give them a nice tip, and you don't have, and you can go home, or you can go and do something, go shopping, whatever, you know.
What
what we did.
What time do you get? What time does your shopping begin on Thanksgiving? Because that seems to be the new layer to Thanksgiving traditions.
So our shopping on Thanksgiving starts probably like 4 weeks later, right before Christmas. We do generally wait.
I like that. I've got some respect for you.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
You're not one of the ones that's like, oh, it's 5 o'clock Thanksgiving. We've already ate lunch. Let's
go shopping. No, we really wait. Me and my wife Sam, we were talking about just last night. We haven't even started the first Christmas. No, I take that back. I've bought one Christmas present over Amazon, which is a great way to go. Well, yeah, I appreciate that. You know, sometimes you don't need to just rush out there. Just enjoy your family, right?
Yeah.
Don't get caught in the commercialism.
Just let it roll.
Yeah, just let it roll.
Just sit at home, watch a horrible Cowboys game, eat some leftovers, and just like you said, spend time with the family. The shopping can wait until the next morning.
Yeah, at least.
At the very least. I would say, like you said, 4 weeks later.
4 weeks later. Because I actually remember Christmas Eve one year. It was about 5 o'clock, right after getting off of work or whatever, and Walmart was about to close, and I had to run in there. I hate to even mention the name, but I had to run in there for some presents, and I felt like, man, this is like the bottom here. This is as long as I could possibly wait, because Walmart was closing. I mean, that place was a madhouse.
You'll get used to it. I used to think that way. I was about 19 or 20.
Yeah.
Here I am now, though, at the end of my 20s. I relish going into Walmart 5 minutes before close.
It's nice, right?
On the holiday.
It's really nice. But, folks, we are talking a little bit about Thanksgiving, and we hope that you chime in. People are chiming in on Facebook, where you can also ask gardening questions. Just go to Facebook and search WRWH. Be sure to like it, because we know you already love WRWH. Let's talk about perennial flower beds. It's time to straighten up your perennial flower beds. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to pull out old dry stems, dry leaves. You know, hostas are starting to dry out. If they're not completely down yet, though, don't make the fresh cut. Because if you make the fresh cut today and we have another frost or freeze tonight, well, guess what? You could damage that fresh wound. So be sure to pull out dry stems of coreopsis, of coneflower, after they can easily be pulled and removed from the plant. Don't cut the stems that don't naturally want to give. Lastly, you want to freshen up the bed with mulch. Be sure to mulch over these perennials. They could use a little bit of protection. And also be sure to mulch your shrubs and trees. Mulching shrubs and trees is a great way, a great time to do it. You need to do that as soon as you can. Talking about Thanksgiving this morning, we want to continue a little bit. We think there's just like with everything else, there are controversies with Thanksgiving. And for some scholars, the jury is still out on whether the feast at Plymouth really constituted the first Thanksgiving in the United States. Indeed, historians have recorded other ceremonies of thanks among European settlers in North America that predate the Pilgrim celebration. In 1565, for instance, almost 100 years before, the Spanish explorer Pedro de Avil invited members of the local Timucua tribe to a dinner in St. Augustine, Florida, after holding a mass to thank God for his crew's safe arrival. And on December 4th, 1619, when 38 British settlers reached a site known as Berkeley 100 on the banks of Virginia's James River, they read a proclamation designating the date as a day of thanksgiving to Almighty God. Now, of course, with most controversies surrounding this, some Native Americans and others take issue with how the Thanksgiving story is presented to the American public, and especially to school children. In their view, the traditional narrative paints a deceptively sunny portrait of relations between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag people, masking the long and bloody battles between them. So, folks, we do have to think about some of those things. But Thanksgiving is still obviously a day to show thanks and our regard to the one who makes growing possible. So, we'll be back with more growing right after these quick messages.
Live editions of Let's Get Growing can be heard Saturday mornings at 9 on AM 1350 and 93.9 FM WRWH.
Back to more Let's Get Growing with Nathan Wilson.
This morning, we want to welcome Trey to the program, Vince, David, of course, Tony. We welcome all these folks to the program. They're watching us on Facebook Live. They're watching Let's Get Growing on Facebook Live, and you can too. Just go to facebook.com and search WRWH, where you'll not just hear, but you'll also see. And be sure to like WRWH's Facebook page. This morning, we've been talking about Thanksgiving traditions. We have been talking about some of my traditions, some of how did this get started? How did Thanksgiving get started? And of course, we've talked with Buster and his excitement about food. Food is always an exciting
Look,
time.
I'm no more or less excited than the audience is. I'm just being honest.
You're being honest.
I want the turkey. I want the mashed potatoes and gravy, and that's numero uno on my brain leading up to Thursday.
That's right. Well, what we've been talking about is we have a questionnaire on our Facebook page at WRWH where you can vote. What excites you the most, food or family? The two F's of Thanksgiving, food or family, which excites you the most? And as Buster says, he's just being brutally honest. The food is what excites him the most. And the more we talk about it.
And considering I have no responsibility in preparing it, it makes it that much better.
It makes it better for you. And how about cleaning up? Any responsibilities there?
Oh, football's on by then.
Yeah.
You know, I'm slogging through a Lions-Cowboys game. I can't be bothered.
You can't be bothered to clean that dish of potato pie, sweet potato pie. No,
come on now.
Not. But the food is exciting. And, of course, we have to remember that the food comes from the garden, right? Maybe it came from your garden. Maybe it came from Ho Green Giant's garden, wherever it came from. Still, the food comes from the earth, and we have so much to be thankful about and so much to give thanks to the one who makes all of this possible. So this morning, I want to clear something up. When we focus on the garden, focus on planting, I want to define a word for you. That word is called yard, Y-A-R-D. We hear this a lot, and I use it a lot. I'm trying not to use it a lot because yard, let me define that for you first of all. You know, what we talk about is, I want some shrubs. I want some bushes for my yard. Or I want to put a tree in my yard. Or I'm going to go play in my yard. Well, folks, the definition for yard is basically the area in which prisoners recreate. Okay. Now, if you want to define your area in front of your landscape or behind your house as an area where prisoners landscape, you can continue to use the word yard. But I think we need to change our mindset. I think it's time to do something new and to use the word garden. Even if you don't have a lot of plants and flowers, maybe you only have turf grass, maybe you have Bermuda or zoysia or fescue, whatever, and, you know, just a little row of shrubs out there. Still, it's a garden. You know, we're growing gardens, not yards. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. That yard.
So yard has specific prison connotations.
I think it does.
All right.
In my view, I think it does.
Isn't that where? I mean, that kind of makes sense because the Britain's FBI equivalent, the
M5. 7, M5, M1?
M16 or something, their headquarters is Scotland Yard.
Scotland Yard. You see, it has so much to do with
not only is he a horticulturist.
Horticulturist.
I get paid to talk on the radio, ladies and gentlemen. He's also an amateur English major.
Yeah, see?
I dig it.
Just define
that UGA degree's paying off.
Right. It paid off big time, but then, of course, I had to pay the bill. So what I'll say, though, is, you know, a lot of times I make up my own words for things. But in this case, yard is the place where prisoners recreate. It's not your landscape. So come on to the nursery. Come on to Lanier Nursery and Gardens, and we'll turn your yard into a garden. Okay, less turf grass and more. Less turf grass and more trees and shrubs and perennials. I want to talk a little bit about composting. Let's talk a bit about composting. The number one rule with all this stuff is to never bag or remove leaves from your landscape. You know, this time of year, I really start to cry when I look and drive down roads and subdivisions or neighborhoods and see bags of brown paper sacks full of yard waste, as people call it, yard waste and clippings and whatnot. You see, there is so much organic matter there. There's so much nutrition. As a matter of fact, about 33% of the nitrogen needs for your lawn can be found in the grass cuttings themselves. The grass clippings, the leaves on the trees, whatever falls to the ground, there's about 33% of your nitrogen needs right there. So think about, you're throwing away 33% of a bag of fertilizer every time you get rid of leaves or cuttings from your landscape. Never do that. What happens is, as these cuttings and leaves break down, the carbon in the material builds the soil. It adds organic matter, which, by the way, organic matter has so many benefits. It holds soil together. It allows the soil it reduces erosion, and it also makes nutrients available. Organic matter can hold on to nutrients like nitrogen, not so much nitrogen, but phosphorus and potassium. And as these leaves and clippings break down, these nutrients are slowly released back into the soil, and they're made available to the plants. So what you want to do is you basically want to layer organic matter on top of the soil. You want a nice thick layer of organic matter on top of your soil, especially in areas where you plan to build and grow a garden in. So if you have a vegetable garden, you can always throw your grass clippings or your leaf cuttings or leaves that have fallen, blow them into the vegetable garden. If you're not growing much in the vegetable garden right now, you can definitely throw them in there and let them break down, and you'll build your soil, add nutrition, etc. Lastly, it helps to keep the weeds at bay. Of course, a nice thick layer of organic matter on top of the soil basically prevents light from penetrating into the soil, and that keeps weeds from prevents them to germinate and cause more problems. This layer of organic matter on the soil helps to moderate your soil temperatures. You see, an exposed soil, can become very, very hot in the summertime, or very cold and frozen in the wintertime. But if you have a nice thick layer of organic matter, guess what? You're going to be just fine. You're going to be great, and your plants are going to love it. Also, that thick layer of organic matter will help to keep moisture moderated in the soil, help to moderate your soil moisture, which just means that on a hot summer day, when exposed soil dries out, your soil will be nice and moist. And during the wintertime, it'll be nice and moist, which you like for that to be. So definitely never, I hate it to see leaves and lawn waste, as they call it, be removed from the landscape. But, that's just a personal preference. And if you want to build a great garden, you're going to need to do things like that. Keep as much organic matter as you can. A last little note about Thanksgiving. Was Thanksgiving ever celebrated outside of America before it was celebrated in America? Well, although the American concept of Thanksgiving developed in the colonies of New England, its roots can be traced back to the other side of the Atlantic. Both the separatists who came over on the Mayflower and the Puritans who arrived soon after brought with them a tradition of providential holidays, days of fasting during difficult or pivotal moments, and days of feasting and celebration to thank God in times of plenty. As an annual celebration of the harvest and its bounty, moreover, Thanksgiving falls under a category of festivals, and that spans cultures, continents, and millennia. Listen to this. In ancient times, the Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Romans feasted and paid tribute to their gods after the fall harvest. Thanksgiving also bears a resemblance to the ancient Jewish harvest festival of Sukkot. Finally, historians have noted that Native Americans had a rich tradition of commemorating the fall harvest with feasting and merrymaking long before Europeans set foot on their shores. So we've got to remember this holiday season, folks, that it's about thanking, right? It's about thanking the Lord who has given us so much. And I hope this year, despite good times and bad times, that you see how blessed you are. Your garden has been full. Your bellies have been full. Your tables will be full in a few days to come. And we just continue to reach out to each other, to our family, and grab a hold of a piece of pecan pie, something tasty and delicious. Folks, I want to remind you before we wrap up here that this Thanksgiving, I know what happens after Thanksgiving is Christmas gets on your mind. And if you're looking for that perfect tree, you don't have to go very far. Just come down to Flowery Branch, Georgia, which is just south of Gainesville, and you can visit me at Lanier Nursery and Gardens. We have Christmas tree land. We will be working on that today. Our Christmas trees are coming in, and we will have a fun time on the weekends We'll be open till 9 on Friday and Saturday, and you can come out and pick your favorite Christmas tree. We will have cut trees, but we'll also have living trees.
Nathan chopped them down himself. He's got the shirt to prove it.
I do. I've got my lumberjack shirt on. And you can see what shirt I'm wearing on Facebook or YouTube if you want to revisit this episode. Just search WRWH. But come visit us at Christmas Tree Land. We are getting very close to the Christmas season, of course, and but we do need to celebrate Thanksgiving before we go that far. I think sometimes we become too commercialized, don't you? You go out and right now, before even Halloween has happened, there were Christmas trees in some of the stores. But our Christmas trees are here just in time for you to get into the holiday spirit right around Thanksgiving. So definitely come out and check us there. I was alluding to the fact that you can visit old shows on YouTube.com. Just go to YouTube.com, whether it's on your smartphone or your computer, and you can search WRWH, Let's Get Growing, and we have all of our shows that we've ever done since this summer posted there for you to enjoy and to hopefully get a kick out of. We do like to share a bit of gardening goodness, of course. That's what we focus on here at Let's Get Growing. But we also share with you some tidbits throughout history. And we've got a lot more to come this fall and winter season. So definitely come back here next week at 9 o'clock here on WRWH for more of Let's Get Growing. Folks, I wish you a happy Thanksgiving. Spend it with your friends and fill your bellies full, and we'll see you next week right here on WRWH.
Thanks for joining us for today's Let's Get Growing program with Nathan Wilson. If you have a comment about today's program, you can reach out to Nathan by sending an email to grow@laniernursarygardens.com. Join us next Saturday for Let's Get Growing on Local News Radio 93.9 FM and AM 1350.